Today I'm going to show you how to build your brand new e-mountain bike from BikesOnline. So this assembly guide will show you everything that you need to know for any of our Shimano steps equipped bikes. So that includes the Polygon Siskiyou T6 and T7E, the Colossus N8E, and then also all the Marin e-mountain bikes as well. So the first step once you receive your box is to make sure and take a look and inspect it, make sure there's no damage, take a photo of the box, just make sure everything's all nice and right. So the next step is removing the bike out of the box. Don't destroy the box, just cut open the top, and then you want to use a friend to help you lift the bike out of the box because e-bikes are a little bit heavier, so we definitely recommend using 2 people here. So once you open up the box, you'll see there's a small little box on top, and this is going to include all the tools that you need to assemble the bike. So we'll take a quick look at this now. So opening it up, you can see everything on the top here. So you've got some bits for your torque wrench here as well. There's a pedal spanner. Then beneath, you've got all the manuals that you're going to need. And then you've got some pedals down there as well as your handy display, which you're definitely going to need too. Then you can see in this little bag here, you've got the Di2 tool, which is going to really help when you're installing the cables. You've got a charging port there, so that's going to help you charge the battery when it's out of the bike. Then bell, bottle opener, and a few other goodies in there as well. And then not to forget as well, in the bottom of the box, you've also got the charging stuff here as well. So again, at this point in time, it's really important not to chuck anything out. Make sure you keep the box, and also make sure you keep all the packaging if you need to return it, ship the bike in any kind of way. It's really important to keep all of that. And I'd also recommend at this point, take some photos of the bike as well, understand how all the packaging goes together, because that's going to really help you if you ever need to do that in the future. So at this point in time, I like to remove all the packaging, and then again, just make sure you put it to the side and keep it for later. So another thing while we're removing the packaging, when you remove the end caps off the hub here, just make sure the end caps don't pop off, because sometimes they can and people accidentally chuck them out. So that's just one thing to keep an eye on. So now that I've removed most of the packaging, if you have a work stand, then you can pop it up in the work stand if that makes it easier for you. Or for me, I'm just going to lean it against something, so I've just got a bit more of a stable platform to put everything on the bike. So the first step really in building the bike is going to be installing the handlebars. So you want to start by removing the faceplate using the 4mm hex bit. And then you're going to grab the bars, make sure the bars are all nice, the cables aren't tangled in any kind of weird way, everything's running freely. And then you're going to pull it back up to the stem there, and then reinstall the faceplate and the bolts. And then we're just going to do this by hand to start with. So once you get the bolts just in a little bit, then we want to start aligning everything and making it nice. It's not going to be perfect to start with, but you want to get a good baseline. So what you're going to do now is tighten the bolts evenly and align the bars. So you can see lightly at the moment we can move it, and you want that X to be in the middle to start with. So that's a good starting point. And then we're going to tighten the bolts a little bit at a time in an X pattern. So you're going to start with this bolt, then that one, then that one, then that one, doing a little bit of maybe a half rotation each time, and then you're going to make sure you're tightening all the bolts evenly, and the gap at the top around here is going to be around about the gap on the bottom is going to be the same. So you're really trying to make it nice and even, because you want to get a nice even clamp force throughout the bars. And then we're not going to quite torque them down yet. We'll do it at the end when we're really dialing in the fit of the bike, but just so you get for reference now, using that cross pattern. So now we've got the bars installed, we're going to install the seat post. So this is actually a dropper post, and what you really want to do first is to remove the battery. So what this is going to do is give you easy access to the dropper post cable, and that's going to make your install a lot easier and make sure the table doesn't get coiled up or caught on anything as you pull it throughout the frame. So removing the battery is a 2-step process. So you're going to install your 4mm hex key in here, and then you're going to give it a quarter turn clockwise when you're looking up at the battery from the down tube. That's going to drop the battery and release it. And then you're going to use your finger here to press the silver tab, and then that's going to be the safety release, and that's going to drop the battery out, and then you can pull it out and remove it. So in some circumstances, the cable might shift throughout shipping or whatnot, and you might not be able to see the end of the dropper post cable here. But that's an easy fix. All you're going to want to do is push in some of the cable at the head tube here, then you're going to feed it through in the down tube here, and then you're going to eventually pull it up here, and then that will give you enough cable here. So that's why it's really important to remove that battery, so you can really feed the cable through properly and not get coiled up and squished or anything like that. So now that we've got the cable up here, we can install the dropper post. So if you get in close and have a look, you can see in the seat post there's a little groove in here, and that's where the end of this little part here on the end of the cable is going to slot in. So what you're going to do is get the cable and feed it through the grooves there. Then once it's all in like that, then you can pull it, and then it sits right in like that. So make sure the plastic cable end sits nicely into that groove there. And as you can see, it's all nice and uninterrupted there. And then we can begin the process of pulling the cable back through so the seat post aligns and the cable's not crushed or anything like that. Make sure the seat post collar is undone when you're pulling it through. So as it goes down, we're pulling the cable through. So as I said, when we're pushing the dropper post down, we're feeding cable through. Down, feeding cable through. And that's going to make sure the cable doesn't get crushed down in this junction somewhere around in here. As you can see now, we've got a loop collecting here. So what that means, we're going to start feeding it through up at the head tube now. So in this point, before we do all the hard work and attach it to the handlebars, I like to give the dropper post a little bit of a test. So we're going to press down the lever like this, and then we're going to push down here, and then push the lever again. So it's all working perfectly. So now we can install the lever onto the bar. So you're going to get a 3mm Allen key or hex key, and then you're going to undo this bolt here so you can open up the clamp. And then what you want to do next is make sure that you feed a little bit of the cable here coming from the controller, so there's a little bit of a loop. So when you do install the clamp, there's no cable running through the middle there, and you're not going to pinch it. And then we can tighten up the clamp using that 3mm hex key. Again, it doesn't need to be super tight at the moment because we're really going to dial in the location and fit of the bike when we finish everything else. So seat posts and handlebars installed now, and next up is the front wheel. So because we're not going to flip the e-bike over because we don't want to mess up the switch here or anything like that, we're going to grab someone to help me out again to install the front wheel. So a quick one here for the T60 and T70 that come with Suntour forks. They use a nifty little axle, which is a little bit different. So I'm just going to show you guys how to use that now. So the axle will have these little things here sticking out when it's in the bike. So what you're going to do here is open it up. So open up the quick release. So what you're going to do is push it in and do a little bit of a right clockwise turn, and then that's going to lock those in place so we can easily slide out the axle. And then it's the opposite when you're putting it in. Slide the axle in, then you're going to turn it anti-clockwise a little bit, and then the lug's going to pop out, and then it's like a normal quick release, and you can tighten it or loosen it as you like normally. Does that make sense? So enough of that confusion out of the way, let's get the front wheel on. So step one is going to be to remove this little brake spacer here. It's always handy to make sure you bring one of these when you're traveling, when you take the front wheel off, and make sure you don't press the brakes when you take this out either, because the pads will close up. Again, we're going to do that little clockwise turn, slides right out. Then we're going to slot the wheel in, making sure the rotor goes into the caliper, and then we're just going to drop it in, and then just going to slide it, and then we're going to slide the axle in again, and then anti-clockwise, lugs go out, and then you can loosen it or unloosen it to really dial in the tension of that quick release lever. You want to start biting about halfway. So it's starting to look a lot more like a bike now. So the next step is we're going to install the pedals. So as I mentioned earlier, the bike does come with pedals, but a lot of people do like installing their own pedals. But the pedals that come with the bike, they're metal and they have half decent pins as well. So if you don't have pedals, they'll do the job. But as I said, if you want to get something a little bit better, I'd recommend getting the Entity PP20s. They're my favorite pedals. But as you can see on the pedals, one's labeled right and one's labeled left. And this is really important because they have different threads. So the right side, or the drive side, tightens clockwise like a normal thread would, but the left side tightens anti-clockwise. So just make sure you tighten those in the right manner. But when you're starting to thread the pedals, you really want to do it by hand first, and then you're going to tighten it with the pedal spanner after, because we don't want to cross thread these pedals because that's going to strip out your cranks. Okay, so that's all the normal stuff out of the way. It's our typical 4-step process. So seat post, handlebars, front wheel, pedals. But on an e-bike, there is a little extra step because we need to connect all the cables to the display that we're going to put on the bars. And this is where that little DI2 tool that came with the bike in the small parts box is going to come in handy. So let's get the display on the bike, and then we'll use this to install the cables. So first up, the display, we're going to pop it around the handlebars there, and then I'm going to flip it upside down because this is going to give you easier access to get to the cables. Again, don't tighten it up super hard here because we're going to flip it back around. So as you can see at the back of the display, there's 3 ports. We're only going to use 2 of them, but it doesn't matter which cable goes into each one. So starting with the switch cable first, we're just going to pull that cable through a little bit, and then we're going to load it into the tool. So just like that. So as you can see, we're just going to put the cable into the little groove here, and then we're going to push it into the display, and then we can pull it off, and there we go. And then the second cable is taped to the frame, and this is coming from the motor. So this one, we're just going to put into the second port here. So again, we're going to load it up. So I'll load it there. Then we're going to push it in, hear the click, rotate it out, and there you go, Bob's your uncle. So now all those cables are in, we can rotate the display around, making sure the cables aren't getting caught on anything, and we can just lightly tighten up the display again. Again, we're going to double check and make sure everything's tight once we finish the build. And that's all good. And then lastly, we just want to space out all these little rubber bands here, making sure we've got an even clamp over the cable, and making sure there's little grooves here on the inside of the cable that you can see that the cable sits in. So we're just going to make sure that's all smooth and all good now. So it's looking good. So the next step is to reinstall the battery to make sure all this stuff communicates together and the bike turns on and it works. So as I said, last step, putting the battery back in. So you're going to line up this side down in the bottom. So pop it in. Should just slide in like that. Then we're going to push it up. Again, 2 steps. So that first little click in there, then use both your hands. Pop, here click, and then it's all good to go. So the moment of truth now, press the power button, hold it down, turns on. So you can see we're on off. If I press the up button here, we're going to toggle through the modes, so eco, trail, and boost. And then we can use the middle button to change what's on the display, so you can see your range there, and a few other things too. And then you can also download the Shimano eTube app, and that's going to allow you to customize your settings and get a little bit more data as well. But we've only got 2 bars of battery, so we should probably charge the bike. So there's 2 ways you can charge your bike. You can do it on your bike using the charger here that came in the separate box that was in the bike box, or you can take the battery off the bike and then use the adapter that came in your small parts box. But because we've got the battery on the bike, I'm going to show you how to charge the battery while it's on the bike. So on the non-drive side here, you can see there's a little port. What you're going to do is pull up the dust cover that keeps all the water and grit out of the charger there. And then you're going to take this end of the charging cable and push that into the port there. And then like any charging cable, you're just going to put the plug in the wall. And then you'll know it's charging when there's an orange light there. If you do want to charge the battery off the bike, it's quite a simple process. So you're going to start off by removing the battery. Then you can grab the adapter that came in your small parts box, and then you'll plug that into the end of the battery. So this end here, and then you can line up the arrow on the edge here. So that's the notch side, and that's going to match up with the arrow that's on the battery as well. So it slides right in. Then you can grab the normal charger that we use to charge the bike when the battery is on the bike. And then you'll plug this end here into the adapter right here. And then like last time, just plug the end into the wall. Then you'll be able to see the orange light on there indicating that it's charging. And then on the battery, you'll be able to see an indication of it charging as well. So that's the main crux of the assembly, but I'll see you in a few hours to make sure we check over the bike and dial in your fit. So the bike's all built up and you might be excited to go for your first ride, but we're not quite there yet. The first thing we want to do is make sure we're dialing in the fit of the bike. So we have a separate video for that, so make sure you check that one out. That's going to make sure that you get your saddle height right, all your levers and controls in the right position, your bar roll right, and that's the main reason we didn't tighten everything down on the handlebars. So you really want to make sure you do that, get that dropper post tight, and those stem bolts, because that's super important when you hit the trail. Next step is going to be getting your suspension dialed. So again, we have a separate video for that. So that's going to help you get the right sag for your suspension. So if you don't understand what that means, I would definitely recommend checking out that video. And it's also going to help you dial in your compression and rebound too. After those 2 things, the next thing you want to do is go around the whole bike and check it over. You want to do what's called an M check. So starting for your rear axle, moving in an M position, make sure that's tight, your drivetrain's running properly. Up to your saddle, make sure all the bolts are tight there. The seat post, all the pivot bolts too, these have got some torques written on them, so make sure you torque them to the right torque. And then your bottom bracket, all that kind of stuff. And then moving up in that M shape to the stem, the bars, brakes, all that stuff's tight too. And then moving down to the front axle. And then just before we get into the trails, you want to make sure your tire pressure's right, and you're going to bed in those brakes as well. So what I like to do is find a hill with a gentle gradient, pedal up, get up to speed, and then hold the brakes down just to the point that they're about to lock up, and then release them, and then do this about 4 or 5 times, going up and down the hill, and that should get your brakes running right. So when you hit the trails for the first time, you're gonna have plenty of confidence and stopping power. And then the last thing you wanna do is make sure you jot down the serial number or take a photo of it in case the worst happens, that your bike gets stolen, warranty or anything like that. You've got all that jotted down so you can identify your bike. Now you're primed and ready for your first ride. As always, with your first ride, you want to be a little bit more attentive. Just make sure after the ride that all the bolts are tight again. Go over, check everything, make sure all the bike's all running right. And then we recommend getting the bike serviced around 3 months after your initial ride. So this is just when the bike's new, everything's bedding in, the cables are going to stretch when it comes to the shifting. So it's just that peace of mind to get everything running nice after those first few months. But most of all, happy new bike day and enjoy your brand new e-mountain bike. And make sure to follow us on our socials. We want to join the adventure with you and we want to keep up to date with what you're riding. But as always, thanks for watching. See ya.